don't even have the recording.
Yeah, he's not recovered, no? He's not having one.
Even though we sat there, you did it.
Hello everyone. Today is the last week of the course and we want to do just the revision of the course and also go through the structure of the last assessment that we are going to do next week. As you know, next week on 18th of October you get the third assignment or kind of take-home exam and you have 72 hours to complete it and return it back. If you do it at once, I'm sure you can do it in maybe 5 or 6 hours. But try to start it early as you get started to make sure you can complete it on time. For the exam, the structure, the first part of the exam starts with some conceptual questions. For example, I have here, and it has, I think, 15% of your final exam, 1-5. It has 2-3 questions in that, and it asks some conceptual questions like that. For example, when you use adjusted R-square, you need to write maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs about that, explaining when, for example, in which situations you use adjusted R-square. Or, for example, what is the difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Therefore, first part of the exam, it's a small part of that, 15%, has some questions like that. Or for example, what is the purpose of having test data set in data partitioning? We went through similar concept or this kind of concept in the lecture, as you know. But you need to, also you can do a bit of search based on the examples that we had in tutorial, or for example, maybe we can start with this. When we use adjusted R-square, anyone can point us? For example, you remember when you use R-square, R-square was the measure to measure the accuracy of the model. It was between 0 and 1, and higher is better. But what is adjusted R-square? You remember we had adjusted R-square in multiple linear regression? When you have more than one variables, you remember if we have more than one variable, as we include more variables, the R-square get better and better, but the model become more complex. R-square adjusted is a measure to consider both of them. It considers the accuracy, higher R-square adjusted is better, and also it penalizes the model if you have more variable or more parameters in the model. Therefore, in R-square, if we include any variable in the model, the accuracy get better and R-square increase. But it's not necessarily true for R-square adjusted. You may include variable in the model, R-square increase, but R-square adjusted decrease. Because R-square adjusted is penalized when you have lots of variable in the model. Therefore, you can say R-square adjusted is a measure for the measuring the accuracy of the model, but it also concerned about the complexity of model. And it's unlike R-square that it's increasing by adding more variable in the model, R-square adjusted might decrease. And it tries to give you the best model in terms of both accuracy and complexity. This is the explanation I expect you to put in the, your paragraph or one or two paragraphs that you write. Yes?
Do you have to justify the journal?
Journal article? I don't expect you to do journal article anything. It's just based on what you're understanding. It's similar to you sitting in the exam, what you get from this course. For example, I expect anyone passing this course know this concept because we went through them several times. I try to explain the concept and things like that. You may get this question or similar type of question. Or for example, why we have test data set in data partitioning. You remember when we did data partitioning in data mining, we divide our data set into training data set, validation data set, and test data set. Why not just having training data set? Why we need, first you need to say why you need data partitioning and say, okay, after that, why not just training and validation? Why you need test data set as well? Anyone can answer these? Then you're lucky you have a take-home exam, otherwise you have to answer them in the exam. Yes?
To do with, so you need you have your first, your sample set, then your second one you might produce multiple models,
Yes.
and then you have the third, this one, to test which one you chose.
Exactly. We do the partitioning because we want to, with training data set, we build our model with several models. With validation data set, we see which model perform better. For example, I build model 1, I measure the accuracy based on the validation data set. For example, ROC 0.6. I build another model 2, maybe with more variables in that. I measure the accuracy, ROC maybe 0.7. Then I say based on the ROC curve or validation data set, I select the best model. I want to say this is the best model. When you select the best model, the next step you want to say how accurate is this model. Because validation data set is already used to measure to select this best model, we need another independent data set to report the accuracy of this model. This is what is the purpose of having test data set. Then after you build your several models, you use validation data set to select the best model. Then this is my best model. I apply test data set on this model to see what is the actual performance of this model. And say, in real life, in real situation, how accurate is this model? Therefore, the purpose of test data set is to report the unbiased measure of accuracy of the final selected model, in short. But you can put some explanation like that in your, first, for example, why you do data partitioning, and then why not training and validation? Why we need test data set? This is maybe one or two paragraphs explaining this concept is very important. Is it clear to everyone, or do you think easy for you to do? Okay, the first question You might not exactly get the same. Maybe you get one or two of these questions, or maybe you get completely different kind of question. But this is a sample kind of, for example, I have maybe 10 or 12 of them, and I select every semester 3 of them. What is the difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning? In short, we can say in unsupervised learning, we don't have response variable. We want to just explore the data, like clustering or partitioning. But in supervised learning, we have explanatory variable. We want to do prediction or classification. Why we call it supervised learning? Because we want to train the model to give us the output that we want. We want to train the model such that if the customer comes, we predict whether the customer is going to default on the loan or not. We want to predict something. We want to do some classification. And we have some historical data, both on response variable and explanatory variables. This is supervised learning. We want to build a model to train like to be like that. If we give them this, give us the output. This is supervised. And you have, for example, we have the model say every time I give you banana, you need to give me apple. This is supervised things, you know. You teach them based on this, I need this. If you have the customer with this characteristic, you need to say this customer is going to default on the loan. If you have the student, with, for example, with this characteristic, you need to say the student deserves to get, for example, HD or not. This is some kind of prediction or classification. But in unsupervised learning, you don't have data like that to train things. You want to just explore what is going on, what's happening, not clustering. You want to divide the data. You don't have actually any output variable. You want to train the model based on that. This is called unsupervised learning. You want to partition the data set, you want to cluster the data, you want to explore, find a trend in the data without having a specific output variables. As I said, 15% of the last assessment is similar conceptual question like that. And for each of them, I expect you to write 1 or 2 paragraphs. Maybe for one of them you can explain more. 2 paragraphs should be okay. But don't try just put the 1 sentence or 1 word, just keyword, don't put your keyword, things like that. Any question about this part? You can again search on internet, look at the videos, but everything, you read the books, but you cannot copy from the books. If you read the books, read the news journal article, read it, what you understand, try to write it with your simple word. Because I don't understand writing in a very hard way in the journal or books as well. Yes?
Do you have a word?
No, there is no word in it. No. But try, I think, don't write too much. Maybe not more than definitely 1 page for each. As I said, if you can, two paragraphs should be sufficient. Okay, then we start with some other question, and also when we go through them, actually we review the course as well, because for all of every week we almost have some question in the last assessment. The first one, usually we go through some basic description statistic that we had in first 2-3 weeks of the course. For example, you have given the data set, it asks you to calculate the average, median, quantile, quartile, mode, standard deviation, and things like that. And definitely you need to use Excel or any other software, but because we use Excel here, you just can copy the data into Excel and create the table based on what is given to you, and put the result into the Word document. It's similar to the first assignment. We only mark the Word document, but we need to submit both Excel and Word file. I think this is very straightforward and maybe very easy for you. Based on any given data set, we can calculate all of the characteristic statistics, quantile, quartile, or if you have been asked to create box plot, things like that. This is what we had in chapter 1 and 2, or maybe a bit in chapter 3 of the course. We can go through that, or maybe I can give you maybe 5 or 6 minute time to complete this one. You can just copy this into Excel and try to do that, if you have your computer in front of you. And in next page also I have the answer guide for you as well. But please, we have just 6 questions. If you can do it, and let me know if you have any question. Copy the data into Excel and try to use the Excel functions like average, median, mode, variance, standard deviation. Third quartile, and so on and so forth. And maybe, for example, the question may ask you comment on the distribution of the travel time. You can just say, for example, compare the mean and median, say whether the distribution is symmetric or left is skewed or right is skewed, things like that. If it asks you about this question also said, comment on the distribution of the data. You can plot the histogram and comment on the distribution, whether it is symmetric or left skewed or right skewed, or you can just compare the mean and median together and see whether the distribution is left or right skewed. This is the solution guide for this. The first question I I'm sure it's very straightforward for you. We just use, for example, average function, median function, mode multifunction, because we may have more than one mode. The standard deviation, make sure you use S because the sample data, var .s function, and percentile .exact. Give us with this kind of function you can get the solution for the first question. And what would be your comment on the distribution? For example, in this case, first you can plot the histograms to see whether it is symmetric, left skewed or right skewed. Other thing, you can look at the median and mode, median and average. Average here is 26 and median is 25. It shows the data is right skewed. Because it shows more than 50% are on the right hand side of the mean. Based on, you can compare the mean and median and say, because average is greater than median, the data is right skewed. But another way for that is plot the histogram of the data and see whether the distribution, how it looks like. Whether it is symmetric or it's right skewed. Right skewed means it has a tail to the right, or left skewed. We had again one slide on week 2 on the shape of the distribution. Any question about this exam in this problem? This is the easy problem, and I'm sure most of you can do it, but try to make sure you use the right function. If it asks you to put some explanation about the distribution, make sure you include them in your Word document. Okay, let's move on to the second question, which is related to the chapter 3 or data visualization. It simply asks you to create, see here in the hint, read the question first please. This is the price of the gasoline for 36 months, and you want to visualize this kind of data. Here, for example, it gives you hint. It gave you a hint that you need to create a line chart. But in the actual assignment, maybe I don't give you that hint because you need to make a decision to see what kind of visualization is most suitable for this kind of data. For example, you remember when we have word of time series, it says you're observing the variable over the time. Therefore, the most useful chart for this kind of data is line chart or maybe a scatter chart. But if you want to see the trend over the time, definitely we need to use line chart. Even without that hint, you should use line chart to visualize this data. Again, you can give it a try and try to create line chart for that. When you create the line chart, the question first asks you to create the visualization, then asks you to create the trend line. If you only give me this, result, you get half of the mark. You need to first create the line chart, and then if the question asks, create the line chart. Again, when you create any plot for the assignment, you need to apply the data in ratio. You will lose mark if you don't. For example, you say this question is not related to data visualization. Still, because we had that things, you have to apply to all of your report. For example, this is the solution. So you can say, for example, there is an increase in the price over the last 36 months. Yes?
So you want two separate?
Two separate charts. Because the question asks you first to create the trend line and then put the trend line, to a line chart and then trend line. Because in some case we had in assignment 1, some not exactly this kind of issue, but some said I put all of them in the same chart and they you have to deduct some more. Try to exactly follow the instruction. Again, delta indeed ratio, make sure you apply it. Is it, I think, easy for everyone to create this kind of chart? Or maybe in the actual assignment, it asks you to, maybe better to create a scatter plot. Depend on the data that you have. Okay, then we move on to the predictive analytics, which is more about regression and forecasting. I want you to give you time to go through this and try to do it yourself first. Read the question and try to do it, please. It is simple linear regression. We want to apply some techniques of data visualization and forecasting for continuous variable. The first part is you want to explore the relationship between these indices. We have two variables, and for relationship between them, two continuous variables, what kind of chart we use? We use a scatter plot. And then after that, you need to report the strength of the relationship. For that, you use usually correlation coefficient, or R. You can use it in Excel. find out the relationship, for this part, we need to create a scatter chart. A scatter chart between index A and index B show you whether there is a relationship or not. Yes. And then, based on that visual interpretation, then you want to come up with some measure. Say how strong is the relationship. You need to use core function. You cannot use R squared for measure of the correlation between them. Two different things. Therefore, for just the first part, you create a scatter chart, and then report the strength of the relationship. You just use core function in Excel to report the correlation of coefficient. It's called R, not R squared. Remember, there are two different things. You say, for example, we can do it quickly here if I can copy the data. First, for the scatter chart, I'm sure it should be very easy for you. This is our scatter chart, but make sure, again, you apply data in ratio, you put the meaningful particle for the chart, or y-axis or x-axis. Based on this one, you see there is a positive, you can see based on this one, you see the positive correlation between the positive relationship between the index A and index B. But how strong is that one? You can use core function. Core function, then select the first data, comma, select the second data. And then you can say the correlation between these two indexes is 0.9. And again, correlation is between negative 1, and you need to explain correlation coefficient is always between negative 1 and 1. Close to 1, it means a strong positive relationship. Close to negative 1, it means a strong negative relationship. Therefore, these two indexes have a strong positive relationship. Therefore, then you fix the data visualization on this one, copy this in your report, and put the explanation about your comment on the strength of relationship. Then the second part of the question asks you to develop the linear regression. Then the next part says, create the estimated regression equation and show how index A is related to index B. Then you can pick the linear regression. Then you need to write down the linear regression and say whether the model is meaningful or not. You remember how to do the linear regression in Excel. You could go to data analysis, select regression, Y, you can select B, X, you can select this variable, and you can remove anything from here. And this is the output. Based on this output, you need to strike your model index B equal to 1, 4, 2, 6, 7.5 plus 63.2977 index. Or you can write, then you can, if you call index B as Y, you can write Y equal to intercept plus slope minus X. This would be your equation. And whether this is the significant relationship or not, you remember we need to look at the significant f, and if it is less than 0.05, you may conclude that the relationship is significant. You can say the significance of f of this model is this value, which is very small value and below the threshold of 0.05, therefore we can conclude the model is significant. The relationship between index A and B are significant. You need to put the wording that explains things. If you question, this question didn't ask, but you can report on R square adjusted at this right. You remember, always R square adjusted is less than R square. Here again you can, it's shown here. This is the model and this is your result, and you refer to the significant f to conclude whether the model is significant or not. Any question about this one, this problem? Some of you, when I just walk around, some of you did applying the trend line. That is good as well. That is correct for getting the equation. But based on that method, you cannot get the significant f. Because if you just fit the trend line on your data on your scatter chart, it doesn't give you the significant f that we need. Significant f is this value. Therefore, I had to, because I wanted to report the significant f, I need to use this method to fit the regression. Although it has just one variable simple linear regression, I could use the other method, but because of this, I needed the significant f. I had to go back from this one. Any question? You can interpret the model, put the explanation about significant f, get the result, apply data ratio. Any question? So far, easy?
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes.
When you've done the equation,
Yes.
that's okay to reduce the decimal points to 1?
Yes, if you report this one and what you report just one decimal point, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Any question? Okay. Let's look at the next question. Again, this is about prediction, but we have more than one variable, and it's a bit more complicated because we have also categorical data as experimental variable. Remember, we call them as continuous variable. Again, please read the question, and you have maybe 5 or 10 minutes time to go through that and try to do it yourself. Because if I explain everything, unless you do it yourself, it's not useful. R is coefficient of correlation. When you have single linear regression, simple linear regression, yes, but not when you have multiple linear regression. It was a good question here. It's good for you if, for example, if some kind of this question come in your explanation part. Can I say R square in regression is always a square of the correlation of coefficient? Correlation of coefficient was the value that we get from core. to find the relationship between two variables. But if I fit the regression between them and calculate the R square, can I say this R square is it equal to R correlation to the power of 2? Think about that, I give you the answer. Is yes or no? The answer is yes or no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Is the question clear for everyone? The question itself is clear, yeah? You know what you need to do. In this example, we want to predict the risk of the diabetic. Therefore, our response variable y is this column. This is our y, or response variable. We want to do the prediction based on age, weight, and gender. Therefore, we can call it age x1 in our model. This is x2, and this is x3. But gender is not the number. We cannot put it in the model. We need to code it. You remember, we need to use dummy variable to code it. Maybe we can call female 1, male 0. Doesn't matter which one you call it. You can do other way. and then you can fit it in the regression. Because here we have categorical variable with 2 levels, because it has only 2 options, male or female. You remember when we have categorical data with k level, we need k minus 1 dummy variable. Therefore here we can just add 1 dummy variable and do it like that. I just copy the data, Control C, go to Excel, and I just can insert a column here, call it gender, and I can here to see if I can't see. Let me just find out what happened. I just copy the data. This is the data that I have. I click here because it's dummy variable. I add a new column here. Call it again gender. I can call here, say, if this equal to female, put it 1, otherwise put it 0. This is coded variable. I now coded the categorical data to quantitative data with this function here. Now I have 3 numeric data, x1, x2, and x3, and this is my response variable or y. Or you can say if female 0, otherwise 1. Both should be correct. And then copy down the formula. You remember in tutorial and in some of the questions in the class, we had some categorical variable with more than 2 levels. We needed to create 2 columns. For example, if region A, region B, and region C. We say we need 1 column whether it's a region A or B, 1 column with region B or C. And if both are 0, it means region C. Hopefully you remember, or otherwise there is a video also on the lecture. If you have categorical data with k value, k levels, for example, in that case, we had the same in region A, B, C. We had 3 levels. We needed 2 dummy variables. Here we have just 1, 2 level, female and male. We have just 1 column should be enough. You remember that one, yeah? There is an example on tutorial and also on video as well on that one. If you had a categorical data with more than 2 levels. Okay, then once you have this one, one thing you could do is better to always put all of the numerical data next to each other. That's why I have these 3 next to each other. Just cut and insert, or you could, from beginning, you could have formula like that. Insert the column before the gender. Then you could go to data analysis, regression, select your response variable y, and select your x's as these 3 next to each other, and click OK. Based on that, then you can say, you can comment about the strength of the model, whether the relationship is significant or not, and then write down the model.
You click on the agenda. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. No. Keep okay. Yeah. Based on that, you can, once you get the result, you can write the formula, you can comment on significant F, you can look at the R square adjusted. Okay, and also p-value for the coefficient. What do you think? Do you think the age is an important factor for prediction of the risk diabetes? And why? First of all, the coefficient is this one, therefore you say by increasing the age, the risk increase because the coefficient is positive. People, when they get older, the risk of having diabetes increases. Second of all, the p-value for that coefficient is very small value. Therefore, that is the important variable in the model. What was the next variable? Weight. What do you think? Weight is contributing factor in risk of diabetes or not? Again, we look at the coefficient of the diabetes. This was for the age. This was for the diabetes. Second variable for weight. For the weight also is positive. Therefore, the model tells us if the people with the more weight, they have more risk of having diabetes. And also the p-value for that is again very small value, less than 0.05. Therefore, yes, this is the contributing factor. This is the important variable for the model. The next one was our dummy variable, gender, female or male. This is negative. What is the meaning of it is negative? Negative because we in our model we gave female 1, male 0. What is the meaning of that? Because if it is female, the risk 1 times -5. If it is male, it is 0 times -5. The model tells us female have less risk of diabetes. Because we gave 1 to female and 0 to male, and the coefficient is negative. Therefore, if you have female, in the model is 1 times -5, therefore some value is taken out from the risk. Female has less risk of being in the risk of the diabetes. But this is the first, so far, therefore female are less risky to be diagnosed with diabetes. But if you look at the p-value, is not less than 0.05. Therefore, maybe gender itself is not important factor. Maybe gender is not a significant factor that can contribute to the risk of diabetes or not. Make sense? Now you can look at the RS, and also model is very strong. R square is 0.9. It means the model is a strong model. It can be used for prediction. R square adjusted model is 0.88. Now, next step, for example, if the question it didn't ask, you could just exclude this one, build the model between, if you build the model only between the age and weight, do you think your R square increase or decrease? Decrease, because always by increasing the variable R square increase. If I go ahead and remove the, let's keep this one. If I go ahead and say, this is my model 1, let's call it model 1. Let me go, this is not in the question, but if in case I can keep both variables in the model. Look at R square here is 0.87. Previous one was, this is my R square. This is for model 2, R square is 0.87. But for model 1, with 3 variables, R square is 0.9. Because you remember we mentioned every time you add variable into your model, no matter how important is that variable, it can increase your R square. Because the model 1 has 3 variables, model 2 has 2 variables, model 1 has higher R square than model 2. But look at the R square adjusted. R square adjusted for this one is 0.85, the other one is 0.8. Again, but this is sometimes the R square adjusted of the other model is better, but in this case again R square adjusted of the model 1 is also better than model 2. Therefore, if you want to go with prediction, we select this model. Although we are not completely saying that the gender is an important factor, but for prediction, yes, it's better to use this model. How you write the equation for this one? Again, equation would be, maybe I have it in the, this is the equation. Maybe for this one is different, maybe I don't know whether in this is, yeah, that is correct, same thing. Female is 1. This is the equation. No, I don't have equation. Let me write down the equation. Response variable, which is our risk of diabetes, is minus 400367 plus 0373681 x1 plus 0.617927 x2 minus 5.53566 x2. This is the equation. This is the model that we get. X1, and then you can write in Y is risk of diabetes, X1 is age, X2 is weight, and X3 is gender, which is 1 if it is female and 0 if it is male. This is the model based on the coefficient that we have. And also significant F is very small value, therefore the model is, the relationship is significant. Let me go back to the question. It also question asks you to, what is the risk? First, it says, present the regression formula as a mathematical equation that we did. Interpret the coefficient. Again, we did the interpret. Which one is important? Increasing the age, increase the risk of diabetes, increasing the weight, because the coefficients are positive, and we look at the p-values as well. This is the interpretation of, you need to write them in your report. Interpretation of the regression coefficient. A strength of the regression, again, we said because R square is 0.9, we said it's a strong model and can be used for prediction. What is then we want to do prediction? What is the risk percentage of the diabetes over the next 4 years for a 44 years old man with 65 kilogram weight? Again, you need to plug this value in the model. We had the model, age was 55, this is the weight, and it was male. Therefore, the negative 5.5 times 0, because the coded male with 0. The risk of the person with that characteristic is 14.7%. You can do it in Excel, yeah? Do that calculation in Excel. Yes? if you code the male as 1, female as 0, yes, you get different coefficient, but the prediction would be same. Anyone can, without building the model, how you can change this model? This is my model, yeah? This is a bit tricky question, but let me see who can answer this one. One of your friends asked if we code male as 1, female as 0. Can you, without doing the modeling again, can you write down the equation for me? Maybe I can put this in the exam question. Give you this one and say, you don't allow to run the model, write the equation for if I coded other way. No, because you have time, you can go do it and right there. No, but it's good to think about that. You know, it's good to go through the concept of that and think about it. Please think about that. It's not that hard, but I'm sure someone maybe. You can think about that from conceptual point of view, or you can think about how two mathematical equations could be same. If x3 is 0 and 1, in the other way. But both should be correct, give you same result in terms of the prediction or strength of the regression. I just write the model here for you. It would be negative 45.56 or 7, or I round it up. And the rest is same. The coefficient of the age should be same. Coefficient of the weight should be same. And here again should be positive. Was it the same as this? Yeah, because it just changed the sign of your dummy variable add the value to your intercept. Think about that. I don't want you to go far to that, but it's very easy to mathematically prove that one. You don't need to redo the modeling again. You just change the sign of your dummy variable from negative to positive and add the dummy variable to your intercept. You can try it and I'm sure you get this result. Okay, let's move on to any question about this one, this problem? This was the multiple linear regression for prediction with dummy variable. You may have one dummy variable, more than one dummy variable, but the procedure, everything is same. And the interpretation of the coefficient p-value, R square, significant F, this is the main concept that you expected to know. Okay. Then the next question is about clustering. We have a data set and we want to use clustering for using hierarchical clustering to do the clustering of the stadium of some universities. Again, please go ahead and do this one. And once you did the clustering, the question also asks you to do the pivot tabling that we had in chapter 2 to summarize the characteristics of each cluster. And the data set is on Blackboard as well. FPS data set is one of the data sets on Blackboard. Read the question, open the data set again. The data set is week 12. For this one, you need to use Analytic Platform Solver, or you can use my desktop version on that, and use clustering, hierarchical clustering. The data set is on Blackboard, solution also is on Blackboard. The slides on Blackboard, Big 12. Everything, the slides, solutions, and data set are on Blackboard. Big 12, yeah. People are leaving, show you the solution. Once you do because clustering was very straightforward, you could just go to the Accelerminer solver platform and select the clustering, hierarchical clustering. Once you get this result, this is the first part. You see, for example, each school is in which cluster, and also the attribute that you use for clustering. We use the stadium capacity, latitude, longitude, endowment, and enrollment. Then we want to summarize what is the average stadium capacity in the cluster 1. What is the average stadium, for example, capacity in cluster 2 and other variable. Once you have that one, we can create, based on this table, you could create this pivot table. I open the Excel file and you can look at the this is question. This is the result of the clustering that you get. Once you get this one, if you go to, you can see that. Sometimes because it's 2 monitors, sometimes it lost the track of the other monitor. I need to. Once you got this one, this is the part of the clustering that, because clustering, once you have the data, you could go to the Accelerminer and select the clustering, hierarchical clustering, and select this variable for doing the clustering, and you can just go ahead and finish. Once you do this procedure, you get cluster, and then in the hierarchical clustering report, you see, for example, each observation in which class. For example, this is cluster 1, this is cluster 2, this is stadium in cluster 2, and so on. But after this one, we want to find out the attribute of the cluster 1, or center of the cluster 1, to see which school are in cluster 1. You want to report, say, the school with this characteristic are in this cluster, the school, because here we have detailed report of each observation in the cluster. Therefore, we go ahead and create this pivot table. If I just click on the pivot table, you see, in this pivot table, we put the average of the stadium capacity, average of the longitude, and average of all of the variable that you want. You put in the calculation value, and in the row you put the cluster ID. This is how you get this pivot table. And this pivot table tell you we have 10 cluster. In cluster 1, we have 15 schools. The average stadium capacity is this one. The average latitude, average longitude, and other characteristics. You know the attribute of, then you can say, for example, if I ask you what is the average, or maybe the question doesn't ask you create the pivot table, it asks you what is the average of the average capacity of a stadium in the schools in cluster 5. Therefore, for answering those, you need to create this pivot table. And this pivot table is based on this table. Hierarchical clustering and based on this table, because in this table you have each observation and the value of each cluster on that observation. Because for the clustering itself, getting the result is very easy. It's very straightforward, procedure. Just click on that and get the result. Once you get the result, you get some mark. But for example, I put some question like that. Maybe give me the attribute of each cluster, or what is the distance between cluster 1 and cluster 2. Distance is not coming in the hierarchical clustering. If you do the K-mean clustering, one of the output is distance between the clusters. You can find out what is the distance between each cluster. Or maybe you get association rule. Example here. Any question on clustering, or you have if you have question on clustering, it's chapter 4. You do the procedure and you may ask about the characteristic of the clusters. You can use pivot table in this example. This file also is on Blackboard. If you want to have a look at the pivot table itself, and pivot table is based on this table. Okay. We should have another question, one more question, or one question on classification. Which technique of classification we had in this course? We only use logistic regression. And you remember when we want to use classification, it's always when you have classification, it means logistic regression. And for logistic regression, we need to use first partitioning and then building the model. Again, the data set is Sandhill's data set. Again, I put it on chapter bit 12. It asks you to classify the customers, and first it asks you to do the partitioning for 60% and 40% based on the training and validation, and then fit the logistic regression, use the cutoff value of 0.5. Because I think we had a tutorial on logistic regression 2 weeks ago. Maybe you are not familiar with this one, but if you want, I can give you maybe 5 or 10 minutes to try to open the data and do the logistic regression, and then we go through the result and explain the interpretation. Then it says, comment on the strength of, first you need to write the model, comment on the strength and validity of the model, report the class 0 and class 1 error, and explain which one of these errors is more undesirable in the current problem. And then once you use the formula, and in the Excel file also you have some new customer, use the formula to do the classification of those customers. Therefore, first open the data, do the partitioning, and then fit the logistic regression, write down the logistic regression, report the class 1 and class 0 error, comment on the strength and validity of the model, you can have maybe 5 or 10 minutes to go through that yourself, and then once you did the data partitioning, and then for logistic regression, you go to the classify and select the logistic regression. This is the result that you get. Because we want to classify the customer based on their balance, we have intercept and the balance. I'm sure those who got it, maybe if you don't know how to do the logistic regression, because we went through that in the lecture, and also there is a video on that. You can go through that, how to get it. But once you get the result, you get the result like that. This is the part of your result. Based on this one, you can write your model. Your model is, let me open it because I want to write the model as well. Problem 6. This is our regression output. First of all, we did the partitioning of the data. This is the data partition, and based on that, this is the, once you do the partitioning of your data, you get this data partition part. And then you go to Excel platform, classify, logistic regression, and select the balance as your selected variable, direct as your output variable, put the cutoff as 0.5. We went through them previously. And then once you build the model, you get the several tabs for your model. One of the tabs is LR output, or logistic regression output. This is the coefficient. The coefficient, based on that, you can build the model. Therefore, your model would be 1 divided by 1 plus exp, or e to the power of, I write it here as a equation, then I translate it to the Excel. E to the power of minus 8.91 plus 0.01 times balance. This is your equation. If you want to write it in Word, excuse me, or if you want to write it as Excel, again, you remember we had this formula. 1 plus 1 exp minus and here we have intercept plus balance times, for example, the variable that we have, or this is the variable that you may have anywhere. This is the function. For example, if I want to do the prediction for one customer with the balance of 10,000, balance should be here, this one. This is the equation that you write mathematically, or you remember we did it several times in the class for implementing that in Excel or in the tutorial. And this is your prediction for this is the model that you get. And if you want to see how good is your model, you need to go to the validation tab, and you look at you need to report this one, ROC curve of validation tab, and look at the area under the curve. You remember again AUC, or area under the curve of the ROC curve for the validation tab, because you have same plots in the training tag, you have same thing if you have test tab. Based on this, you say the model is strong because the area under the ROC curve is 0.96. It is always between 0 and 1. Closer to 1 means stronger the model. Therefore, this is, you can report about the strength of the model based on this plot. What else the question asks? And you could write the equation of the model. the question asks you about do the data partitioning, fit the logistic regression. We put the cutoff value of 0.5. You could ask for any cutoff value, comment of a string, and the validity of the model. Therefore, here you need to report the ROC curve for the validation data set and say, because for example, it is very high value, close to 1, the model is strong for doing the classification. Report class 0 and class 1 error. If you go to logistic regression output, this is your class 0 and class 1 error, or we call it confusion matrix. Class 0 error is 16%, class 1 error is 16%, class 0 error is 4%. Which one is more, for example, this is good, or if you had class 0 16%, class 1 4%? Which one is better? Which one of these error is better? You remember we said, depending on the problem, context of the problem, you may prefer to have some error in the other one, less error in the, for example, if you want to predict whether the patient, for example, has a stroke or not, if you predict that and then send it for CT scan. If you predict the patient as he or she needs a scan, but actually he or she didn't have a stroke, is bad because you didn't use the resources. You didn't, you use your resources. You wasted your resources. But if the person had a stroke and you say no, it's okay, he or she doesn't need a scan, you actually, for example, risk the life of the patient. Therefore, sometimes, depending on the context of the model, you prefer to have some of these kind of error is more important for you. Class 1 error is, it says it actually was 1, but you said 0. Class 0 error, class 1 error, and class 0 error say it actually was 0 and you said 1. You need to look at the context of the problem and see which one of them is more undesirable for your context. There is no general conclusion that say always class 0 error is better, or say always class 1 error is better. Depend on, you need to understand your problem. Say, if you make it error, saying one person who is actually class 1 saying 0, is it bad, or saying the person who is actually 0 and give it to 1? Which one is worse? Which one you more want to avoid? This is this kind of thing, depend on the context. In this problem, what do you think? What was the one we wanted to classify?
Direct deposit.
No one read the question.
Direct deposit?
I didn't. Who did? What was that?
Direct deposit? Is that?
Yeah, direct deposit. For example, and you wanted to say whether direct deposit is? Who read better? Again, in this question, it's similar to approving the loan. If someone is good and you fail to giving the loan, it's kind of the class 1 error. Still, you just lose the customer. But if someone is 0 and you give it a loan, you just you wasted the money. You gave the loan, you cannot give it back. Therefore, in this example, class 0 error is more undesirable. But again, you need to write about the context of the problem. What else we had here? Data for prediction. If you have, for example, new data, you remember you have new data like that. If, for example, let me give you, this is the, if you have a new data, for example, you have for new customer, you have the balance, for example, 1,700. You want to do the prediction for them, you just actually apply the model that we had. 1 divided by the model that we wrote. 1 plus exp negative, and then here the coefficient that we had, intercept, plus slope, times this value. And intercept, you remember we had the intercept as well. I just put the number here. Intercept was -8 something, and the slope was 0.01. Yeah. Let me just, if you intercept from the model was -8.0, or just round it -8. You are not allowed to round it in the exam, okay? But and this is the, for example, prediction for this customer. And because it is less than 0.5, your prediction would be 0. Because it is greater than 0.5, because you use the cutoff value of 0.5. Yeah? Here we use 1. You can do the prediction for new customer. If new customer given to you, you want to predict the class for that, based on the formula that you have, you can do prediction. Again, we had some example on this one, on the tutorial, and also on the video that I put on the Blackboard. We have 2 more questions. The next question is on a spreadsheet. I'm sure you find it, again, easy question. This is based on what we had on chapter 10 or 2 weeks ago. Again, please read the question and again, this is on using the what-if scenario and goal setting. You remember I have always problem with what-if scenario and I cannot do it. Last time I wanted to do it, I failed, even in tutorial. This time I first look at the screen. You have this solution on Blackboard. First, for example, say, assume she invests $10,000 every year with interest rate of, and the interest rate that bank pay to her is 6%. Therefore, this is the year 1 is just this value, end of the year 1. End of year 2, the formula for year 2 is interest plus the previous value. How we calculate the interest? Interest is 6% of the interest is 6% of the previous year. For example, end of year 1, she invests $10,000. She put $10,000 in the saving account. End of the year 2, or maybe let's say if because she put it end of the year 1, end of the year 2, she received that interest. That value times interest rate. Interest rate is 6%. Yeah? This is the interest that she will get at the end of the year 2, because she had $10,000 1 year sitting on the account. At the end of year 2, she has this value plus this interest plus another $10,000. and then you can copy down this to formula. This is the spreadsheet model. Yeah? We calculate the interest on return on investment or interest that she get at the end of each year, and then plus the previous amount of year plus the current investment. This is the value at the end of each year. If you just copy these two formula down, make sure you, for example, you have to fix the interest rate. Therefore, you put the dollar sign or F4 for here to lock that cell. And here, you need to lock this 10,000 because $10,000 is fixed every time. Then you can copy the formula down and see, for example, if she invests 10,000 and the interest rate is, or return rate is 6%, after 30 years she has $790,000. This is how we create this spreadsheet model. But the question also asks, what if the person invests 5,000, 6,000? It says from 5,000 to 20,000 with increment of 1,000. This is our scenarios. Or what if the interest rate is 0 to, this is again question asked to develop scenario when the interest rate is from 0 to 12% with increment of 1%. We want to calculate how much money she will have after 30 years if for example, interest rate is 1% and she invests 5,000 at the end of each year. Therefore, this is again, what if we put this one, this is the value of our base scenario. Our base scenario was 10,000 with 6%. This is our base scenario. We put this value. This is the cell. We put this value here, and then we select these two, go to the data, what if analysis, data table. The row we're changing is our interest rate because we put the interest rate, different value for interest rate in the row. Therefore, the row we're changing is interest rate. The column we're changing is amount of investment at the end of each year. If you do that one, it gives you the value at the end of each year that you have after 30 years of investment based on different scenarios of the amount of money you decide to put and based on the rate of return. This time it works, it was interesting. Any question? Easy? Then you will get RHD. What should I do? Big problem. Okay. Let's then look at the last, this is again answer guide for this one. The last question is what we had last week about optimization. We need to formulate the model and again solve it. Again, maybe you can read the question. There is a restaurant want to allocate the advertising budget of 1,000 between the newspaper advertisement. They have some limitation or constraint. No, that is just you can build your base scenario with any number. Doesn't matter. Base scenario can be any number. You can put 1, you can put 50,000. At least each newsletter need to have 25% of the budget to be allocated. This is one constraint. And also we have each newsletter has some index of advertising between 0 and 100. And higher means better for the newsletter. what is the decision variable in this problem? You remember when we want to build the optimization model, we said what is the decision variable, what is the objective function, and what is or are the constraint. What is the decision variable here? Amount of budget should be allocated to each of these, for example, advertisement channel. What is the objective function? What is the objective function? Say, for example, we have amount of, if we call N amount of spend on the newspaper advertisement, and R amount of spend on radio advertisement. This is our two decision variables, N and R, or we could call it X1 and X2. And we want to maximize 50N plus 80R. What is 50N plus 80R? This is our objective function. It says the value of index of for local news data advertising is 50, and the value of index for the spot radio advertising is 80. For every dollar spent on the newsletter, you get 50 index of, for example, broadcasting or advertisement, and 80 for radio. And you know N plus R should be 1,000 because your total budget is $1,000. You know you should at least spend 25% of the budget in each of them. Therefore, N should be greater, 25% of 1,000 is 250. Therefore, for newsletter, you have N should be greater than 250, and also R should be greater than 250. Because the question said you have to invest at least 25% on each. And also you have one constraint, N greater than 2R. Amount of investment in the newsletter should be greater than twice of the amount of advertisement on radio. This is again here where was that one? Here. It says the amount of money spent on local newsletter advertising must be at least twice the amount spent on the radio advertising. This is another constraint here. Therefore, it can translate here to N should be greater than or equal to 2R. And definitely, you cannot allocate negative budget to them. N and R should be positive. Then once you have this model, you can implement it in Excel and solve it with Excel. Again, the solution on Excel on this one is on Blackboard. I can. This is our decision variables. If you go to data solver to solve this one, this is our decision variable. The objective function is this is our objective function, or you can put some product, or you can say if you allocate, for example, 666, just put random number. Let me put just random number. Assume I put $100 here and $900 here. The amount of the, for example, objective that I get is 100 times 50 plus 900 times 80. This is the objective. And I have some constraint that I have some constraint that each of them should be, if I go to the solver, say I want to maximize this cell. The cell I want to maximize is this one. Based on the changing variable are these two, based on the allocation of the budget to newspaper and radio. And the constraint, one of the constraints here is this constraint is cell B14. B14 is amount of budget allocated to here should be greater than 25% of 10,000. 25, this is B8 times B9, 25% of $1,000. This is another constraint, again, for the radio. This should be greater than or equal to, you remember how to do that. You could just change, and this is, if I, objective, well, I change the objective. But I can explain it from the, again, for this first one and third one is based on the amount of budget should be greater than 25% of 1,000. The second one is say B14 is newspaper and C14 is radio. B14 should be greater than or equal to 2 times C14 because we want to invest twice in newsletter than radio. And also the last one is sum of them, which is total spend, cell E14 should be less than or equal to available budget, which is 1,000, or you can change it to equal. You know why I cannot edit this file? Because you could also change it to you can change it to event to equal, or less than, greater than, or less than equal. Then you can solve it, and it give you the question, the solution. Less than equal. This should be here. And this is the best solution. For example, you assume $666 to newsletter and $333 to radio, and the objective that you get is 60,000. Again, you get one question about the optimization that also you had the tutorial this week, and maybe you have some of you have after the class as well. You will get the similar structure of the question for assessment. It's not surprise, and you have 72 hours to do that, but don't leave it to the last minute. Start it from early. 8 questions. Yeah, same thing, same question, same structure. You have 2 or 3 explanation questions and 7 or 8 solving question like this. You need to give me, we only mark the Word document, but you need to provide the Excel file as well. For Excel file, it would be good if you rename the tab as model 1 or question 1 to make it easy for marking. No, you can have more than one Excel file. You can have one Excel file for each question, but one Word document. Because we only mark Word document, but look at the Excel file to make sure you have the result based on your Word Excel file. If you have the result in the Excel correct, but not provided in Word document or not correct, you don't get marked. Any other things? And try to write it clearly and write as explanation that is requested. You don't think, for example, yes, he knows what I mean, or things like that. All the best with all of you, and it was very great to have you as a student in the course. I hope you have a very successful journey for your program and your future. And even in future, if you come across with any business analytic problem or you needed my help, I'm more than happy. Just email to me and let's keep in touch. Okay, all the best to you.